$3.99. That's it. That one number, sitting at the end of nearly every price tag you've seen in your entire life, is doing more work on your brain than almost any other single trick in modern commerce, and it's been sitting there so long you've stopped consciously seeing it at all. You know, logically, that $3.99 is basically $4. Your brain doesn't process it that way. It reads the first digit first, files it as $3 something, and moves on. And that tiny gap between what you know and what you feel is worth an enormous amount of money to nearly every business on Earth. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. This isn't a guess or a theory some marketer came up with over coffee. It's called left-digit bias, and it's been tested repeatedly in controlled studies. Researchers have shown that dropping a price from $4 to $3.99 increases sales far more than that 1 cent could possibly justify on its own, purely because of how the human brain encodes numbers. It reads quickly. Your brain treats the leftmost digit as carrying almost all the weight of the number, which means a price ending in 99 isn't really about the 99 at all. It's about making sure your brain locks onto a 3 instead of a 4 in that split second before you've thought about it at all. Let's talk about anchoring next, because this is where prices start playing games with each other rather than just with you directly. You've seen this 1,000 times without naming it. A jacket marked as originally $200, now on sale for $80. That $200 number, whether or not anyone ever actually paid it, does something specific to your brain. It sets a reference point, an anchor, and every price you see afterward gets measured against that anchor instead of against what the item is actually worth to you. $80 feels like a steal next to $200. It might feel completely unreasonable if it had simply been labeled $80 from the start, with no anchor in sight at all. Retailers know this well enough that inflated original prices that were barely, if ever, actually charged have become common enough to draw regulatory attention in some places, precisely because the anchor does so much of the persuading before you've evaluated anything else. Now here's a curiosity gap worth sitting with. Why do stores sometimes offer a clearly worse deal right next to a better one instead of just hiding it? Because that worse option isn't there to be bought. It's there to be compared against. This is called the decoy effect, and it shows up constantly in bundle pricing. Imagine a small popcorn for $3, a medium for $6.50, and a large for $7. Almost nobody wants the medium. Its entire job is to sit there and make the large look like an obviously smarter choice for 50 cents more, even though, on its own, most people would never have chosen a large at all. Once that medium decoy exists next to it, the large stops looking like an indulgence and starts looking like the responsible choice. Researchers who study pricing have found decoys like this reliably shift a meaningful share of buyers toward the more expensive option, purely by changing what it's being compared against, not by changing anything about the product itself. Let's talk about subscriptions for a moment, because this is where pricing psychology has quietly built one of its most profitable modern tricks. Free trials are, almost without exception, designed to be effortless to start and just annoying enough to cancel. Signing up takes 1 click and 30 seconds. Canceling frequently requires finding a hidden settings menu, sometimes even calling a phone number or navigating multiple confirmation screens specifically built to make you reconsider. This gap isn't accidental friction, it's asymmetric friction, deliberately engineered to be small on the way in and large on the way out. Add to that the fact that most people simply forget the trial period is ending at all, caught up in daily life, and you get a business model that quietly profits from inattention as much as it profits from the product itself. Then there's the subscription tier trick, something you'll recognize from streaming services, software, and meal kits alike. Companies frequently present 3 tiers: a basic option stripped down enough to feel a little embarrassing, a premium option priced high enough to feel excessive, and a middle option that suddenly looks perfectly reasonable sitting between the two. That middle tier usually isn't the cheapest thing to produce or the most profitable option on its own. It's the option most people were always going to be steered toward, dressed up to look like a free, independent choice. There's also a framing trick that has almost nothing to do with the actual number and everything to do with the words wrapped around it. Telling someone they'll save $50 feels meaningfully different from telling them they'll lose $50 by not acting, even when both statements describe the exact same outcome mathematically. Behavioral economists have shown, again and again, that people respond more strongly to the threat of a loss than to the promise of an equivalent gain, a principle called loss aversion. That's exactly why so much marketing language leans on phrases like "don't miss out," "limited time only," or "offer ends tonight." It's not primarily about urgency. It's about quietly reframing a simple purchase decision into something that feels like avoiding a loss, which your brain, for purely evolutionary reasons, takes far more seriously than an equivalent opportunity to gain. And then there's the free shipping threshold, a number so common now that most people barely register how strange it actually is. Spend $35, get free shipping. You needed one item for $12. Suddenly you're adding a second, unnecessary item just to clear that $35 line, saving maybe $5 on shipping by spending an extra $15 on something you didn't originally want. That threshold number isn't picked at random. Retailers calculate it specifically to sit just above what a typical single-item order would cost, close enough that reaching it feels achievable, far enough that reaching it usually requires adding something extra to the cart. The shipping fee was never really the point. The extra item was. Here's the part that ties all of it together, and it's worth remembering the next time you're standing in front of any price tag, browsing an online store, or deciding whether to click Buy Now. None of these pricing tricks work by lying to you outright. That's what makes them so effective. A price ending in 99 is technically accurate. A product marked down from a higher price may genuinely have been sold for that amount at some point. A premium option sitting beside the one the company wants you to choose is usually a real product you could actually buy. Everything is technically true. The reason these strategies work isn't because they're false, it's because they quietly shape the comparison your brain makes before you've had time to think about it. Your mind relies on shortcuts every day. Instead of calculating the true value of every purchase, it compares one number to another and searches for the quickest answer. Retailers know this, and many prices are designed around those shortcuts rather than around the product itself. That's why a crossed-out original price immediately feels like a bargain, even if you never plan to pay the higher amount. It's why a price ending in 99 feels noticeably cheaper than the next whole dollar, despite the difference being only a single cent. It's why an intentionally expensive option can suddenly make the middle choice seem like incredible value. None of those reactions require you to consciously believe anything. They happen automatically, often before you've even realized you're making a decision. By the time your logical brain begins comparing features or weighing the pros and cons, your emotional brain has usually already formed an opinion. It has decided whether something feels expensive, affordable, urgent, or like a deal that's too good to miss. Logic often arrives afterward, not to make the decision, but to explain the one that has already been made. That's also why these tactics work on almost everyone. They don't depend on people being careless or unintelligent. They're designed around the normal way human brains process information. Even people who understand these strategies can still be influenced by them because the first reaction happens automatically. Knowing the trick doesn't always stop the effect. It simply makes it easier to recognize what's happening. Companies don't need to deceive you because they don't have to. If they can influence what your brain compares first, they can influence what feels like a good deal. The context surrounding a price often matters more than the number itself. So the next time you see a price ending in 99, a large crossed-out discount, a countdown timer, or a suspiciously expensive option sitting beside the one that seems just right, remember that the trick isn't in the number itself. It's in the split second before you notice there was a trick at all. That's the moment these techniques are designed to capture. And that's exactly the moment worth training yourself to catch. You don't need to memorize every pricing strategy or become an expert in consumer psychology. The simplest defense is slowing that split second down. Ask yourself what you would think of the price if none of the surrounding numbers, discounts, decoys, or deadlines existed. Would it still feel like good value? Would you still want it if it were the only option available? That brief pause won't make you immune to these techniques, but it gives your rational mind a chance to catch up before emotion quietly takes the lead. None of these tactics require you to be careless or unintelligent to work. They're built to operate underneath conscious evaluation, which means the best defense isn't cleverness. It's simply giving yourself enough time to make the decision instead of letting the decision make itself.